You think consciousness is something physics could explain. You think there's an equation waiting somewhere, hidden in the mathematics of neurons and electrons, that will finally tell you what it feels like to be you. You think the mind is just another machine, and machines can be understood. But here's the uncomfortable truth. You don't even know what you're asking. Right now, as you listen to these words, something is happening. There's a quality to your experience. The sound of this voice isn't just air molecules vibrating your eardrums. It's not just electrical signals racing through your auditory cortex. It's something else. It's the experience itself. The philosophers call it qualia, the texture of red, the taste of salt, the particular way sadness feels in your chest. And physics has absolutely nothing to say about it. Nothing. You can measure everything about the color red. You can tell me it's light with a wavelength of roughly 650 nanometers. You can map every neuron that fires when you see it. You can trace the cascade of chemical reactions in your visual cortex. You can build a complete physical description of what happens when you look at a red apple. But nowhere in that description will you find redness. Nowhere in the equations will you discover what red feels like. The experience itself remains completely outside the system. This should bother you more than it does. Think about this moment. You're aware. You're conscious of being conscious. There's something it's like to be you right now in this exact moment. You can feel your thoughts forming, watch them arrive like uninvited guests. You didn't choose to be conscious. You didn't decide to have experiences. Yet, here you are, trapped inside this strange theater of awareness, watching the show but never quite sure who's watching. Physics describes relationships. It tells you how things interact, how forces work, how particles behave according to rules. But consciousness isn't a relationship between things. It's not a force. It's not a particle. It's the fact that there's something rather than nothing happening inside your skull. It's the difference between a brain and a rock. And that difference, that fundamental what it's likeness, doesn't appear anywhere in the periodic table. Feynman knew this. He was too honest not to. He could calculate the probability amplitude for an electron to travel from point A to point B. He could describe the weak force, the strong force, electromagnetism. He could explain rainbows and why ice is slippery and how radios work. But when it came to consciousness, he hit the same wall everyone hits. The math stops working. The tools fail. Not because the tools are crude, but because they're measuring the wrong thing entirely. You want to believe that if we just knew enough, if we just had enough data, we could crack it. Map every synapse, record every spike, build a complete wiring diagram of the human brain. Then we'd understand consciousness. Then we'd know what mind really is. But understanding the wiring diagram of a television doesn't tell you what it's like to watch a sunset on that screen. Knowing how pixels light up doesn't explain the experience of seeing the sunset. There's a gap there, a chasm, and you can't bridge it with more information about pixels. Consider what happens when you look at someone you love. Your pupils dilate. Your heart rate increases slightly. Oxytocin floods your system. Specific regions of your prefrontal cortex light up on an fMRI scan. All of this is measurable. All of it is physical. All of it follows the laws of nature. But the feeling itself, that specific quality of what love feels like, that particular texture of emotion, remains stubbornly private. It's yours alone. No one else can access it. No instrument can detect it. It exists in a space that physics can't reach. And this is where things get strange, because you are made of physics. Every atom in your body obeys the same rules that govern stars and stones. The neurons in your brain are just cells. Cells are just molecules. Molecules are just atoms. Atoms are just quantum fields fluctuating in space. There's nothing special about the physical stuff you're made from. Iron in your blood is the same iron in a meteorite. Carbon in your bones is the same carbon in charcoal. The elements don't care that they're arranged into a pattern called you. Yet somehow, this particular arrangement of perfectly ordinary matter has created something that wasn't there before. Experience, awareness, the felt quality of being. And that shouldn't be possible, not according to anything physics tells us about how matter behaves. You can imagine a universe where all the physical laws are exactly the same, where neurons fire and chemicals flow and brains process information exactly as they do in our universe, but where there's nobody home, where it's all just dark inside. Zombies, the philosophers call them, beings that act conscious but aren't, beings that process information without experiencing anything. And nothing in physics forbids this. Nothing in the equations demands that matter, when arranged just so, must feel like something. But you're not a zombie. You know you're not. That's the one thing you're absolutely certain of. You experience. You feel. You are aware. This is the only fact about the universe you know directly, without inference, without instruments, without theory. Everything else is interpretation. But consciousness is immediate. It's the thing doing the interpreting. So what does physics have to say about the one thing you know for certain? Nothing useful. It can tell you about correlations. When this brain state occurs, subjects report seeing blue. When that region activates, people describe feeling afraid. But correlation isn't explanation. Knowing that C fibers firing correlates with pain doesn't explain why pain hurts. It doesn't bridge the gap between the physical description and the felt experience. You're still left with two completely different kinds of facts, existing in two completely different conceptual spaces, with no clear way to translate between them. Feynman would tell you, this is because you're asking the wrong question. He'd say, explaining consciousness with physics is like trying to explain color to someone who's been blind since birth. The explanation isn't inadequate because you're using the wrong words. It's inadequate because explanation itself can't capture the thing you're trying to convey. Experience has to be experienced. It can't be described from the outside. It can't be reduced to something else. And maybe that's the point. Maybe consciousness isn't a problem to be solved. Maybe it's a category error to think physics should explain it. Physics explains objective phenomena, things that exist from no particular point of view, things that would still be there even if no one was looking. But consciousness is precisely the opposite. It's the ultimate subjective phenomenon. It's the point of view itself. It's the looking, not the thing being looked at. You can study the brain all you want. You can map every connection, measure every voltage, predict every output. You can build perfect models of how neurons compute, how networks process, how information flows, and all of that is real science, real progress, real understanding, but it's understanding of the brain, not understanding of the mind, not understanding of what it's like to have a mind. The hard problem, they call it. Why does the physical processing of information in the brain give rise to the subjective experience of consciousness? Why is there something it feels like to be you? And the answer might be that this question doesn't have an answer. Not because we're not smart enough, but because the question itself is malformed. It's asking why A equals B when A and B are fundamentally different kinds of things that can't be equated. Think about the moment you fall asleep. 1 second you're aware, thinking, experiencing, then nothing. Then you wake up and you're aware again. Where did you go? What happened to consciousness during that gap? Physics can tell you. Your brain kept functioning, blood kept flowing, neurons kept firing, just in different patterns. But you weren't there. The lights went out, and then they came back on. But physics sees no discontinuity. To physics, sleeping brain and waking brain are just different states of the same physical system, equally real, equally valid. But to you, they're completely different. One contains the entire universe of your experience. The other contains nothing at all. One is everything, the other is void. And physics can't tell the difference. Or consider this. Right now, there's a specific pattern of neural activity in your brain. A particular configuration of billions of neurons, each one firing or not firing, each one contributing to the overall state. That state is what's generating your current experience, your current thoughts, your current sense of being you right now in this moment. But that exact same pattern could, in principle, occur in a different brain, or in a computer simulation, or in some vast cosmic accident, where particles randomly arrange themselves into that precise configuration. Would that pattern be you? Would it experience what you're experiencing? Would there be someone there, or would it be empty? Physics can't answer this. It can only tell you the pattern is identical. But identical patterns don't necessarily mean identical experiences, or do they? You have no way to know. No experiment could decide, because consciousness is the one thing that can't be observed from outside. It's always and only from inside. And inside is precisely where physics can't go. This is what Feynman understood that many people miss. Science is powerful, remarkably powerful. It's given us transistors and antibiotics and an understanding of stars. But science works by taking the subjective out of the picture, by finding descriptions that work regardless of who's looking, by building models that are objective, repeatable, universal. And consciousness is the exact opposite. It's irreducibly subjective, unrepeatable, because your experience right now will never happen again exactly this way. Personal, because it's yours alone. So when you ask if physics can explain consciousness, you're asking if the method designed to eliminate subjectivity can explain subjectivity itself. You're asking if the tool built to describe things from no point of view can describe the point of view. And the answer has to be no. Not because physics is incomplete, but because it's the wrong tool for this job. You can't use a ruler to measure temperature, not because your ruler isn't good enough, but because rulers measure length, not heat. They're different kinds of things, but here's where it gets even stranger. You are physics. Your brain is a physical object made of matter operating according to physical laws. There's no magic substance in there, no soul juice, no conscious particles. It's just atoms doing what atoms do. And yet, somehow, when those atoms are arranged in the pattern called your brain, there's an experience happening. There's awareness. There's what it's likeness. The very thing physics can't explain is being produced by the very thing physics can explain. This paradox sits at the heart of everything. You are simultaneously the subject experiencing the world and an object in the world being experienced. You are both the observer and the observed. And these two perspectives don't fit together. They can't be reconciled. Not because we don't understand enough yet, but because they're fundamentally different kinds of perspectives that describe fundamentally different kinds of facts. The physicist sees a brain, neurons firing, chemicals flowing, information processing, all of it deterministic, or at least probabilistic in predictable ways, all of it following rules, all of it explainable in principle. But you, from inside, experience freedom, choice, meaning, the feeling that your thoughts matter, that your decisions are real, that your consciousness isn't just watching a movie but actually doing something. And both perspectives are true. Both are real. But they're incompatible. They can't both be the whole story, yet they both are. This is the crack in the foundation, the place where our understanding breaks down. Not because we need better instruments or smarter theories, but because we're trying to unify things that can't be unified. We're trying to make a single story out of two stories that are written in languages that can't be translated. Feynman was comfortable with this kind of not knowing. He didn't need everything to fit into a neat package. He was fine with mystery, with limits, with questions that don't have answers. He knew that some things can be understood and some things can only be experienced. And consciousness is in the second category. It's what's doing the understanding so it can't be understood in the same way. It's the lens, not the landscape. You can't look at what you're looking through. And maybe that's okay. Maybe consciousness doesn't need to be explained. Maybe it just needs to be noticed. You spend your whole life inside this strange phenomenon, experiencing moment after moment, thought after thought, sensation after sensation, and you take it completely for granted. You assume everyone else has it too, though you can never really know. You assume you understand it, though you've never stopped to really examine what it is. You assume physics will explain it someday, though physics was never designed to explain things like this. But right now, in this moment, you are conscious. You are aware. There is something it is like to be you, hearing these words, thinking these thoughts, feeling whatever you're feeling. And that fact, that simple, undeniable, immediate fact is more certain than any scientific theory, more solid than any equation, more real than any model. Because it's not a theory or an equation or a model. It's the actual, direct, lived reality of being. Physics can explain the stars. It can explain atoms and forces and fields. It can even explain the brain that generates your consciousness. But it can't explain you, the experiencing you, the aware you, the you that's listening right now. And perhaps that's the point where physics ends and something else begins. Not mysticism, not religion, not magic. Just the simple acknowledgement that there are different ways of knowing, different kinds of truth. And the truth of your own consciousness is a different kind of truth than the truth of particle physics. Both are real. Both are valid. But they're not the same. You are the universe becoming aware of itself. You are matter that somehow inexplicably feels. You are physics that has discovered experience, and no equation will ever capture what that's like. Because equations describe, they don't experience. They can tell you how neurons fire. They can't tell you what it's like to have neurons. They can predict behavior. They can't predict qualia. They can model the brain. They can't model being. So when you ask if physics can explain consciousness, the answer is both yes and no. Yes, physics can explain the brain. Every physical process, every chemical reaction, every electrical signal, that's all explainable in principle. But no, physics can't explain consciousness itself, the experience, the awareness, the what it's likeness. Because that's not a physical thing. It's what having physical things feels like. You are not your brain, but you're not separate from it either. You are what your brain does when it's doing you. You are the process, not the processor. The pattern, not the particles. The music, not the instrument. And music can't be explained by describing the instrument in enough detail. You have to hear it. So maybe the question isn't whether physics can explain consciousness. Maybe the question is why you thought it needed to. You are here. You are aware. You experience. That's not a problem to solve. That's not a mystery to unravel. That's not a gap in our knowledge waiting to be filled. That's just what being is. And being doesn't need permission from physics to exist. You are the proof that something exists beyond equations, beyond models, beyond objective description, not outside physics, inside it, at the very heart of it. The part that watches, the part that knows, the part that feels. And that part will never be captured by the tools designed to look at everything else. Because that part isn't everything else. That part is you.